Hello, all, and welcome. We are back again with Coaching for Transformation. This is the third conversation in our series, Regenerative Leadership and Why It Matters Today. In week one, Susan helped us define regenerative leadership and explained why it moves the leadership conversation beyond individual effectiveness and toward collective capacity and sustainable impact. In week two, we talked about why this matters now, especially in a world where leaders are dealing with complexity, workforce strain, technology disruption, and the risk of depleting individual leaders by asking them to carry too much on their own. So today, we are bringing the conversation into practice. Susan is here once again, of course, and now we are joined by Dr. Nancy Zentis, Susan's partner in developing this regenerative leader work. Nancy brings deep experience in organizational development, leadership development, system change, and executive coaching. So this is a great conversation to have with them both. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello, Susan. Welcome back.
Hi, Dario. So good to be back.
I know.
This has been a great series.
Oh, yes, it has. Yes, it has. And of course, Nancy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate being here.
I know. We're excited to have you.
Yeah.
So let's dive in here. Susan, let me start with you.
Okay.
When you and Nancy talk about regenerative leadership in practice, right, what does that actually mean?
Well, Dario, I think the key word that you said was practice, right? So regenerative leadership is not just a concept that we want leaders to understand. It's actually something we want them to experience, to apply, and to reflect on in the context of real work in their environment. And that matters because most leaders really don't need another leadership model, something abstract that's sitting on a binder or on a slide deck. They really need help thinking differently about the leadership challenges that they're already facing. So when Nancy and I talk about regenerative leadership in practice, we're really talking about the intersection of leadership development, coaching, organizational development, systems thinking, and real business challenges. And it's about helping leaders notice the system that they're operating in, understanding that the impact of their choices that it has, engaging stakeholders more intentionally, and building capacity around them rather than trying to carry everything by themselves.
Well, Nancy, let me bring you in here from your perspective. Why does this work need both leadership development and organizational development?
Thanks for asking, Dario. And I think it's because leadership doesn't really happen in isolation. A leader might come into a development experience wanting to improve communication, influence, decision-making, or team effectiveness. All those are very important. But when you look more closely, many of those challenges are really connected to the larger system. So the communication problem they might be experiencing might be actually a trust problem. A performance problem may be connected to unclear expectations or competing priorities. And a team issue may be connected to structure, culture, decision rights, or unresolved change. And that's where organization development is so important. Organization development uses a systems approach to help leaders look beyond the presenting issue and determine by asking, what pattern is this part of? What is the system reinforcing? What relationships, assumptions, or conditions are shaping this behavior? And when you combine that with leadership, the development, the leader is not just learning a skill, the leader is learning how to see and work with the system more effectively.
Yeah, and that's exactly why this partnership for us has been so important, because my work often focuses on leadership capability, coaching, of course, learning, design, and development, how leaders build the human capacity to perform. What Nancy brings to the table is that very deep organization development lens, how systems work, how change happens, how culture is shaped, and how patterns repeat. So really together, the work becomes much richer because of the both of us and our disciplines. And because we're not simply asking, what does this leader need to learn? We're also asking, what's happening in the system around this leader? What capacity needs to be strengthened and what needs to shift so that they and the organization can create healthier, more sustainable impact?
So one thing I hear in this is that the development is not separate from the work, right? It is happening through the work.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, Dario. Regenerative leadership should not feel like a retreat from real work, right? So it really should help leaders return to the real work with more clarity, capacity, and really a much broader view or a systems view of impact. And that's why real business challenges are such an important part of the approach. When leaders bring a real challenge into the learning experience, they're not practicing leadership in theory. They're looking at a situation that actually matters to them and occurs in their work environment every day. So they're asking who's affected, what patterns are showing up, what assumptions are operating, and where capacity is thin and what kind of impact they want to create. And that's when leadership development becomes much more alive. Wouldn't you agree, Nancy?
I absolutely, and it also helps leaders slow down. They often want to make fast decisions and get results, but it helps them slow down enough to see the whole picture. In organizations, leaders are often under pressure to solve quickly. They move from problem to solution very fast. They're rewarded by that. That can be necessary at some times, but we are always moving that way. We may solve the surface problem and miss the deeper problem. In the regenerative approach, we ask leaders to pause, look at the challenge systematically, and identify who are the stakeholders, what's the history, what's being reinforced, what's being avoided, where is the energy, where is their resistance, and what could a healthier outcome look like, not only for the business, for the people and the relationships involved. Those questions help leaders move from reacting to understanding.
Well, I have to say, so it's not slowing down for the sake of slowing down, of course, right? It is slowing down enough to lead more wisely.
Absolutely.
So, Susan, week 2, we focused on the risk of depleting individual leaders. So, how does the practice of regenerative leadership help address that?
It helps leaders see where they may be carrying too much, right, without realizing it. I think it just seems like the velocity of what we expect leaders to do is only increasing. So many strong leaders are used to stepping in. They solve problems, they decide, they interpret, they get things moving again. And these behaviors often become really good intentions, but over time, they can actually create dependency. In practice, regenerative leadership invites leaders to ask, where am I unintentionally becoming the bottleneck, right? Because it's that heroic leadership thing we talked about.
Yeah.
Where does the team need more ownership? Other people, there's a whole plethora of people in the organization to help carry the load, right? So leaders need to learn to reflect, where am I solving something that others need to learn how to solve? And where am I protecting people from discomfort that might actually be good for their growth, right? They may not be ready. That's why they have stretch assignments, right? So those are not easy questions, but they're also very powerful.
Absolutely, Susan. And they are also compassionate questions. This is not about telling leaders to stop caring or start supporting the teams. It's about helping them learn to support people in ways that build capacity. Sometimes the most helpful leadership move is not to provide the answer immediately. It may be to create the conversation, clarify the decision space, ask a better question, or help the team see the pattern they are stuck in. And that is how leadership becomes more distributed across the organization.
Yes. And that's where collective leadership becomes very practical, right? So we can all work on it together. And it doesn't mean everyone's doing everything. That's not what it means. It means the team's building more shared judgment, ownership, and accountability. And one of the ways we reduce depletion is by practicing collective leadership, right? So the leader is still important, but the leader is no longer the only source of energy, clarity, or movement. It should feel a lot lighter.
So, when leaders are in this kind of program or experience, right, what are they actually working on?
Well, they're working on themselves, of course, right? Because part of the program really has them understanding the inner leader part that matters. It looks at their relationships and their real leadership challenges at the same time. So that may sound like a lot, but it's very synthesized, and it's actually how leadership works in real life. So a leader may come in and with a challenge like improving cross-functional collaboration, or we have to address burnout in the organization, or a change initiative that we have to get through. So all of these things are really important, and we want to help that leader look at the challenge through multiple lenses, right? So what is the business need? What are the human dynamics? reinforce? What does the system reinforce? And who do we need at the table? Like, who's missing here today? And what am I making assumptions about that actually I need diversity of thought, because people need to challenge my thinking, right? So that we think more broadly and open-minded. And I think so the leader is not just learning about regenerative leadership, they're actually using the regenerative lens to work on something real.
And reflection is a big part of that
Mm-hmm.
for their learning. We want them to synthesize what the experience is and then continue that ongoing. So leaders need some space to examine how they're showing up in the system. They also, they need to think about, what do they tend to notice? What do they miss? When do they move too quickly? And where do they need to avoid conflict? Where might they overfunction? And where might they unintentionally silence other voices? That's really big. Those are the kinds of insights that allow a leader to shift their impact. The work is developmental, but it's applied.
Yeah, and that's really what makes it different from a traditional leadership program that's primarily content driven. You may have assessments and things like that. The content matters, of course, that's still important. But the real transformation happens when those leaders are connecting the content to their own behavior, their team dynamics, their business realities, and the larger systems that they're trying to influence.
So let us make this very practical for the HR, L&D, OD, and leadership development leaders listening. What can they do now if this resonates with them?
Well, I would say start by looking at the leadership experiences you're already offering and ask whether they are building individual skill only, or are they building collective capacity, because really that I want to hone in on that collective capacity piece. This is an important distinction. Are the leaders working on real challenges in their work, or are they mostly consuming content? Are they learning to think more systemically, more broadly when they're working on projects, like the stakeholder impact? This goes back to that whole systems thinking piece that's always a theme in my work for sure. And really, are they practicing distribution of ownership and developing capacity in other people? So those questions can really help HR, L&D, and OD leaders see where they may really have an opportunity to evolve their leadership development approach for the betterment of the organization.
Absolutely. And I really think that if HR, L&D, and OD leaders are looking for a leadership development opportunities they might want to think about borrowing from our regenerative leadership process, because some other things, if they think this might be appropriate, they can also pay attention to the signs of depletion in the organization. These are really big concerns for organizations today. So where are leaders exhausted? The complex change that's been going on for the past 5 years, where are teams dependent on a few people, where they're, maybe not involving everyone and taking a deep dive and looking at that? Where is change not landing? Where are people complying but not really engaging, maybe burning out? Here's where we see a lot of challenges around psychological safety. Where are patterns repeating even after training or communication, so it didn't really stick, or it wasn't reinforced, or people weren't held accountable? Those are signals that the system may need something deeper than another leadership development program. They may need to point to the need for a more integrated approach, one that combines not only their development, but also facilitation, coaching, and systems work.
Yeah, and really that is the heart of the regenerative leader work that Nancy and I have been shaping. That OD lens in this regenerative leader program is so critical and so important. And it's really designed for leaders and organizations that want leadership development to be more than a learning event. It's for organizations that want leaders to build capacity, strengthen systems, engage their stakeholders, and create a more sustainable impact in the organization.
Honestly, listening, this has been a great way to bring the series into practice. Susan, let me ask you first, what do you want people to take away from this final conversation?
Well, I'd want them to take away that regenerative leadership is practical. It's not just a philosophy, that it's, it's not just a sustainability idea. It's really a way of helping leaders work with real complexity, which they're all facing right now, in a much more thoughtful and sustained way. And, it helps leaders ask better questions about the impact that they're having, the capacity that they're building, and the conditions that they're actually creating in their work environment for others to thrive. And for HR, L&D, OD leaders, it's really going to offer a way to make leadership development more connected to real business challenges and real organizational renewal.
And how about you, Nancy? What would you add?
Well, I'd add that one thing that comes to my mind is this isn't new. It's been around for a long time, over 80 years, this
Mhm.
whole process. It really came about from the field of organization development. And when we look at the complex changes that are reoccurring almost a decade now, we know that organizations do not renew themselves by accident. They renew through intentional leadership, intentional conversations, and intentional attention to the systems people are working inside. That's why some of the most successful organizations thrive and survive. Regenerative leadership gives leaders a way to look at their work with a wider lens. It helps them think not only about immediate results, which are important, but also about the people, the relationships, and the long-term capacity required for the future.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, honestly, that is a very strong place to close. Susan, Nancy, thank you both so much.
Thank you, Dario. This has been great. Nancy, thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. I'm pleasure to be involved. Thank you.
And for those listening, this concludes our 3-part series on regenerative leadership, why it matters today. If this conversation resonates with you and you are thinking about how to evolve leadership development in your organization, we invite you to learn more about the Regenerative Leader program Susan and Nancy have developed. This program is designed for organizations that want to build collective leadership capacity, strengthen systems of work, and help leaders create more sustainable impact. To learn more or start a conversation, contact Minaya Learning Global Solutions at info@minayalearning.com. In the meantime, thanks for joining us on Coaching for Transformation, and we hope you gain some insights. Until next time.